Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Phatphil, and today I want to give you my State of the Galaxy for April 2024. You guys gotta let me know if you want me to make this a regular monthly series. I will be putting this in its own playlist, but I want to talk about how I see the state of this game right now. What things am I happy about? What things do I think need updated or addressed, right? And to give you some context on the difference between a road ahead and what I'd say a state of the galaxy should be. A road ahead is telling you, hey, this is what's coming in the future. A state of the galaxy says, hey, this is the game right now. What's happening? What are we looking at? So let's dive right in here. Channel members, please ask for your patience. You all are fantastic. I very much appreciate you putting up with me. It's, we're getting better. I'm hoping April's a lot better month for me than March was. So let's dive in here. So we have the different cadence for Bo-Katan and Jedi Knight Cal. And again, I want to bring this up because we just got confirmation her event will be coming back April 20th, which is a month later than the last one, which was March 20th. So I'm very excited about that. I think this is really great because it's doing a couple of things. One of the big issues that I found Galaxy of Heroes had with Journey Guide characters was that unless you were in a perfect position to farm that character like I was for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, there was no reason to farm them until they hit the Journey Guide because you didn't know when they would be coming back. So if you were trying to time yourself up to, hey, you know what? I'm going to build, if I'm trying to build Paz Vizsla, Grogu, and Kelleran Beck, if I don't know when Bo-Katan is coming back, why would I be throwing crazy relics on these characters during that time? Because for all I know, if her event just ended and it's like, oh, well, now you've got 3 months. Do I really want to be sitting on these relics at Relic 7 for the next 3 months? Probably not. So I think by doing it this way, you're allowing a lot more players to kind of soft whale their way to the character. And I think it's going to give people more opportunities to use that character before they get into the Journey Guide, which I think is very important. So I'm very happy about this. I want it to continue. This is a great change, and I hope it continues with Jar Jar as well. That Jar Jar kind of coming back this way would be really nice. So I did talk about the Lightspeed bundles and kind of the economy around them. So I do want to just mention this briefly that I think right now the economy is still a lot of players short on Zetas and all that, and I made a whole video where I talked about it. But this kind of leads into this point that I think right now the game is not ready for any more Lightspeed bundles. I don't think we're ready for any kind of future Lightspeed bundles because I feel that we're still playing catch up on the original ones. And when I say catch up, I'm not just referring to, oh, maybe you got your Rey and you got your Kylo, but do you have all the Zetas you need on those characters? Do you have the mods? Like, is it a faction that you're like, yeah, I feel confident about using this in a game mode? So I don't think we're ready for more Lightspeed bundles when I still think a lot of the player base who the Lightspeed bundles were really intended to help haven't yet recovered from the impact of them to their account. So I think right now the economy of the game, while they could use an influx of Zetas, mods, and other materials, they do have to be careful because I brought this up that you increase the number of Zetas we get every single month for the sake of argument. The impact that has to players in the lower levels is a lot greater than it does to the players in the upper levels of this game. And then if you put them into something where they're only going to give players at the top end of the game those Zetas, well, then you're, making that gap between the middle and the end a lot bigger. So I really think right now with the economy, they've got to kind of figure out the way to release that stuff without sort of giving a significant advantage to one group or the other group. So that's why I think we're not ready for the future Lightspeed bundles, is that the economy still hasn't even recovered from the initial ones. All right, update on Conquest. So I've thought this for a while that Conquest definitely needs an update or an overhaul. And there's a couple of things that go on here. Number one is just the varying difficulty between Conquest. I don't know if you guys have ever really given this much thought, but one thing I've noticed a trend in is that certain conquests seem far more difficult than others. Certain conquests seem to have far more difficult feats, teams, than other ones do. Particularly, I think Darth Bane compared to Padme Amidala, or Queen Amidala here. I feel like their conquests are crazily different. Even some of the Proving Grounds tiers are significantly harder than others. But I also think that there needs to be an update done here where there's I feel like we need another difficulty of Conquest. So when you think about Conquest and hard mode, it begins at 4 million galactic power. that 4 million GP is when hard mode Conquest unlocks, as long as you've completed normal. And you think that hard mode goes from 4 million all the way up to the highest level accounts with 14 plus million galactic power. I think that realistically there needs to be an update to say, hey, maybe make a very hard mode of Conquest with a, hey, you've got to be 10 million or something. That there needs to be something to separate players to say, hey, like hard mode Conquest is designed to give you rewards to progress to X level. And then beyond that, like they're not super helpful outside of the character. So I think in like a very hard mode Conquest, that could be really beneficial to the player base. And I feel like right now Conquest is sort of this, how do I say it? The resources that are getting used for players in the end game, right? The Kyber 1, Kyber 2 players, it's just a Datacron farming fest. That's all we're doing is we're farming Datacrons. Whereas for people in the earlier stages of the game, it's about, I really need to focus on get every feat I can for these characters. So, I feel like there should be, I feel like I'd love to see an update, and I feel like it needs one. So again, that's kind of my current state of Conquest. I'm not overly thrilled that I think it's not really rewarding players equally for what their roster is. And again, I'm not saying that we need to give crazy amounts of rewards, but just change the rewards to say, hey, if you're at 11 million galactic power, you don't really need air magnifiers right now. You need Gerda keypads or droid brains, that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see something like that. All right, so Datacron update. So one of the things I think with Datacrons that has, in some ways I think bothered me, is the Datacrons for characters like Bo, Dark Trooper Gideon, and even Darth Bane. That their Datacrons are so significant, so good, and make a massive difference between your average player and like the top players, right? That like they are so good. And it's already a big advantage to have these characters because you think if people didn't get them in Conquest, they're already without. So, or, didn't farm Bo-Katan, you're already without. So you're already down a significantly good character. And now that Datacron is putting them to be on level or better than certain galactic legends, like, it's not, it's not really quote unquote fair, right? Whereas the Datacrons like the Sharut one, Darth Sidious, I'm a huge fan of those ones. I think these kinds of, Datacrons are exactly what we need out of Datacrons. Like, I feel like that's exactly what we want, and that's what they should be. Taking a character that's mediocre at best, making them really solid for a short period of time. That's, hey, you're going to mix and match, you're going to figure out what the best team to use them is, how can they, best work with your team. Like, that's what I'd love to see. That's what I'm happy is happening with these guys. But these ones kind of continuing to be a big problem with me personally. And I mean, of course, we'd be completely out of line if we didn't mention the fact that the current Resistance Datacrons, in my opinion, are concerning. I mean, you've got a Holdo one, you've got a Ray one, like you've got a bunch of these Datacrons. But here's kind of what I'd say, is that one of the problems I have is that the Resistance tag itself is not something that the vast majority of the player base has unless they have built Rey, right? That unless you've built this character, you're not really getting to take advantage of this level 6. Now, you can take advantage of some of these other levels, but, like, look at the Jedi. Yes, if you don't have Ki-Adi-Mundi, Kit Fisto, Mace Windu, or Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, you don't get to take advantage of that level 9. But think of how many people have that Jedi tag. Same thing with the Sith. Okay, you don't have Darth Bane, but there's still a lot of Sith characters who can benefit from that tag. With the Resistance and even like First Order being, two factions that always come to mind this way, unless you've really built that Galactic Legend or you purchase those Lightspeed bundles, you don't often have that faction. So I've never been a big fan of that. Like when they had the Scoundrel tag for last time, like there's such a great, wide array of characters there. I feel like I'm a big fan of those kinds of Datacrons when it's a wide array of characters. You think the Empire one here, right? Like this is awesome. Hey, yeah, Empire, but the characters are, much smaller. So yeah, just a little bit of like, I hate this. Like, I shouldn't say I hate it because like I have the Resistance, but it feels like Resistance is one that a lot of players will probably not want unless you have Ray, because it's not going to help you, right? So I don't know. I maybe I spent too much time on that, but you know, of course, here's our king. So next is this matchmaking issue in Territory Wars. Territory Wars to me has a systemic like matchmaking problem, and that is because Territory War brackets have not changed in years. And the bracket, although I can't show you the actual brackets themselves, I'm going to demonstrate it in another way. So, when you look at like the guild leaderboards here and galactic power, so the top guild in this game has 695 million galactic power. The top bracket for Territory Wars is 380 million plus. So just to put this in perspective here, right? The 200th guild in this game, right? Number 200 here is 537 million. So you think the top, at the 200, and there's more below this. Like, look, you're starting to get into everybody at like 537 here. But you think even just the top 200 guilds alone are at least 157 million galactic power over that top bracket. So this guild, Dark Lord's Resistance, is in the same bracket as, and let's scroll all the way up here at 537, they're in the same bracket as these guilds all the way up here, and as we keep going, and I get like there's not that many above 600, but you realistically, they're in the same bracket as, you know, Night's Watch and the Bad Batch Unleashed, guilds with 70 plus million galactic power more than them. And then you think there are guilds that are at 400 million who are also in this bracket. And so the way they determine matchmaking is, hey, what's your active galactic power? So if my guild at 550 million has 10 players absent, we're going to compete on a galactic power level without 10 of those players. And that's so unfair. And the big reason why I say that this is a matchmaking issue is that there's no difference in rewards from winning if you're 381 million to if you are Maw Chromium. There's no difference in those level of rewards. So you imagine that you're Caw Patrol going up against Maw Chromium, and Caw Patrol at 678 million galactic power loses. And my guild with 550 million galactic power wins. We just got more rewards than a guild with 678 million galactic power. Is that really fair, if you will? I mean, probably not, right? Like, that's a bit extreme. Maybe you're like, you know what? Yeah, like, that's fair. But should they get this same, you know, they lost. Should they really be getting significantly less rewards than a guild who won with 381 million? Like, come on now. So I think what they need to do is adjust the Territory War brackets to say, hey, you know what? Like, my guild, we had to face, who was it? Because they absolutely destroyed us. I'm trying to remember who it was, but wherever they are, they were a very, very large guild, like, and we just got absolutely destroyed. And the thing that we said is, we're like, I don't like, they were down some players and we just got absolutely, like, it was a massacre, right? But it kind of made us realize that, you know, there's a matchmaking issue here that, like, we shouldn't really be getting paired up with that guild. But the reason we got paired up is because, you know, you're all in this big bracket here. There's nothing to kind of separate you guys. So, and you could say, oh, well, what if they're, you know, inactive players, drop them down into that bracket? Fine, but give us a bit more rewards to recognize that we lost, but we have X amount of galactic power. And I know it sounds like, oh, I'm complaining just for my guild, but you've got to recognize something here, guys. A guild like Maw Chromium, because, like, these guilds at the top here, when you see that they're all like, oh yeah, like, we focus really heavily on Territory Wars, they get to take advantage of the fact that the matchmaking can't force them to go 500. Like, if you look at their win-loss record, it's insane, right? Like, they have like an over 80% win ratio. You think where most of us struggle to maintain that like 50-50, because the game will just force, hey, Phil's guild is 9-0. Well, now you're going to go face Bad Batch Unleashed and Nightwasp and Hothski Patrol and Clones Unleashed and all of these guilds, you're going to go lose 9 in a row. Like, they do not allow you to really break up that 500 without manipulating your guild size to drop to a lower bracket. Whereas guilds like this, they can just win all their territory wars as long as they're, and they're the best, so they get to do that. But you think some of these other guys also get to maybe drop down a little bit and destroy other people. So I think they need to redo matchmaking a bit to, I feel like territory wars needs a matchmaking fix to recognize that we need more brackets and that the rewards should change a little bit to account for the fact that losing at 670 million galactic power is not the same as losing at 410 million. And then finally, top end bias. And here I am saying, hey, the top end deserves more rewards. But that kind of fits in with this matchmaking issue that a lot of stuff in this game is really designed for those top end players to take advantage of that. And I think one of the big things in this game right now that I'm seeing is those guys not only get to do that in territory wars, but think of those players in Grand Arena. That Aesop Rock gets to have a Grand Arena win-loss ratio way above 500. Arnold, same thing, way above 500. That they get to have what I would say is consistent matchmaking, steady matchmaking, that there's this top-end bias around matchmaking that exists even outside of this stuff. And then even you think about when new content gets released, it's always kind of, hey, those top-end guys, they're willing to spend the money, so they deserve to have some level of bias there. But I think that in the game right now, there's a certain bias that's giving them matchmaking that's consistent, matchmaking that is fairer, right? Like, obviously, there's not many guilds that can compete with Maw Chromium in a territory war. But the difference between Maw Chromium and, like, Call Patrol is far, like, that 17 million galactic power. There's not really that much separating them at that point. Like, that 17 million is probably, Sharut Relic 8 to Relic 9 or something. You know what I mean? Like, we're splitting hairs. Whereas the difference between 17 million from 400 to 417 could be a lot more significant. And that matchmaking could prove to be far more difficult for people. So, yeah, I definitely think there's some top-end bias right now. Do I have the answer to it? Absolutely not. But I think a lot of it could start with matchmaking that just kind of allow people to be competitive against their own kind. And that goes for Grand Arena and Territory Wars, because I know a lot of people who would love to go crazy in Grand Arena, but there's really no purpose when you reach a certain point and you just can't win anymore. Whereas those guys at the top end of the game, they get to go crazy in Grand Arena every single time. Like Arnold has a good matchup every single time. Now, and you say, oh, well, he's always out Datacron. I can understand that, but it's not like he's going up against somebody who has 4 more Galactic Legends than him. Like there's levels to it. So I just want to kind of throw that out there, guys. Let me know your thoughts. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, my friends.